What happens when a virgin who writes erotic romance stories meets a mafia king whose body hasn't responded to a woman in 3 years? His rules were simple: serve him by day, please him by night, never expect love. But Alexandra had rules too. Write everything down, every touch, every whisper, every dark secret. She was supposed to be his maid, his temporary fix, his nobody. The mafia king who owned half of Vegas didn't know he was becoming her greatest story, or that the shy girl in his bed would soon be almost as rich as him. Her words and her innocence would bring the most dangerous man in Vegas to his knees. Stefano Bruni, 37, stood in front of the urologist, fastening his belt with slow, deliberate movements. His cold grey eyes held a question mark as he stared at the older man behind the mahogany desk. "So, doctor, what's wrong with me?" The urologist cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses before meeting the gaze of Las Vegas's most dangerous man. "Mr. Bruni, your lack of interest in women is entirely psychological. There's nothing physically wrong with you." Psychological. The word echoed in his mind like a verdict. 3 years. 3 years of feeling nothing, no desire, no attraction, not even curiosity. Women threw themselves at him constantly. Beautiful women, powerful women, women who would kill to share his bed. And his body responded to none of them. He rose from the leather chair without a word, his jaw tight enough to crack. The urologist flinched as Stefano walked past him, leaving the pristine office without so much as a goodbye. Outside the door he paused. His fingers raked through his dark hair as he exhaled slowly, the frustration coiling in his chest like a living thing. Andre, his most trusted guard, stood with his hands clasped in front of him, eyes forward. "Boss, what now?" Stefano straightened his Italian suit jacket, smoothing the fabric with hands that betrayed none of the turmoil inside him. "Velvet noir. We're going to the club." The black Mercedes cut through the Las Vegas night like a shark through water. Stefano watched the neon lights blur past the tinted windows, his reflection staring back at him. 37 years old, heir to the Bruni Empire, owner of half this city, and broken in the one way that mattered. Alexandra Moore, 23, stood outside the club, her worn jeans and faded sweater making her feel like a stain on the glittering Vegas sidewalk. The sign above the entrance read, "Velvet Noir," in elegant gold letters, and below it, a smaller notice. "Dancers wanted." Her stomach churned as she read the words again. $5. That's all she had left after her roommates had stolen the rent money she'd spent 3 months saving. 3 days until eviction, and then what? Go back to Texas? Back to him? No. She'd rather die on these streets than go back to her stepfather Ray, the man whose hands had started wandering the moment she turned 18. Can I really do this? She had never even been kissed properly. Dancing for men? The very thought made her skin crawl. But desperation had a way of erasing pride. She was about to turn away, to convince herself there had to be another way, when a black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. The door opened and a man stepped out. Time seemed to slow. He was tall, over 6 feet, with dark hair and a jaw that could cut glass. His charcoal suit probably cost more than her annual salary at the cafe. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Grey, cold, like winter storms trapped in human form. Power clung to him like a second skin, visible in every measured step he took. Behind him, a massive guard followed in silence. Alexandra couldn't move. She stood frozen on the sidewalk, directly in his path, her worn sneakers rooted to the concrete. By the time her brain screamed at her to move, it was too late. She turned and collided directly into his chest. The impact sent her stumbling backward, her cheap canvas bag slipping from her shoulder. She was falling, the ground rushing up to meet her when iron fingers closed around her wrist. For one suspended moment, she found herself looking up into those storm-grey eyes. His grip was firm, his body radiating heat through the expensive fabric of his suit. She could smell his cologne, something dark and masculine, leather and sandalwood, and underneath it, the clean scent of his skin. Oh, God! Her heart hammered against her ribs. Who is this man? Then his expression shifted. The momentary flash of something, surprise, curiosity, disappeared behind a mask of cold disgust. He released her wrist like it burned him, taking a deliberate step back. "Andre." His voice was low, commanding, and utterly dismissive. "Make sure these types don't loiter outside our establishment. It damages our reputation." The words hit Alexandra like a slap. Heat flooded her cheeks, not embarrassment, but anger. These types, as if she were garbage, as if she weren't even worth looking at. She wanted to say something, to throw his arrogance back in his face. In her stories, the romance novels she wrote in secret, her heroines always had the perfect comeback for men like him. But standing here in her threadbare clothes with $5 to her name, the words died in her throat. Stefano was already walking away, his broad shoulders cutting through the crowd of people waiting to enter. But halfway to the door, he paused. A scent had reached him, something unexpected among the cigarette smoke and expensive perfume that always hung around Velvet Noir. Soap, jasmine, something fresh and clean and utterly out of place. Her. He didn't turn around. But for one strange moment, something stirred in his chest. A flicker of interest he hadn't felt in years. Then it was gone, dismissed as quickly as it came. The club doors swallowed him whole. Alexandra stood on the sidewalk, her cheeks still burning, when the guard, Andre, bent down to retrieve her fallen bag. She tensed, expecting more cruelty, but his eyes were surprisingly kind. "Here you go, miss." He handed her the worn canvas, then glanced at the sign she'd been staring at. "This is a quality establishment. If you're here about the job, don't be afraid. No harm will come to you inside." Before she could respond, he followed his boss through the golden doors. Alexandra clutched her bag to her chest, her mind racing. That arrogant man, whoever he was, had humiliated her, made her feel like nothing. Men like him had always made her feel small, powerless, invisible. In my stories, she thought, her jaw tightening, women like me destroy men like him. But this wasn't a story. This was her life, and in 3 days she'd be homeless. She took a deep breath, then another, and then, before she could talk herself out of it, she walked through the doors of Velvet Noir. The inside was everything she'd expected, and nothing like it at the same time. Red velvet drapes, crystal chandeliers, marble floors. Beautiful women carried drinks to men in expensive suits, while dancers moved on elevated stages. Alexandra felt like she'd stepped into a world where she didn't belong. "You here for the audition?" She spun around. A middle-aged man in a tailored vest eyed her from head to toe, his gaze calculating but not cruel. Her throat tightened. Yes. Mario." He extended a hand, and she shook it with trembling fingers. "I manage the girls here." His eyes swept over her with professional assessment. Silky, honey-blonde hair tumbling past her shoulders, big green eyes that kept darting to the floor, petite frame but curved in all the right places. Beautiful. Shy, too. He nodded once. $50 for 10 minutes on stage. You're hired." He tilted his head, handing her a bundle of fabric. "Put these on, go backstage, and dance." Alexandra's stomach dropped as she looked at the outfit, if you could call it that. "I've never—" Mario's expression softened. "First time? Just feel the music. Dressing room's through there. 5 minutes." The dressing room mirror showed a stranger. The outfit left nothing to the imagination. "I can't do this." Her eyes caught a mask on the wall, black lace, silver edges. She reached for it. The moment it touched her skin, something shifted. She wasn't Alexandra anymore. Just one night, just enough to survive. She stepped onto the stage. He was about to leave. This had been pointless, like every other night, when the lights cut to black. The music shifted, slower, darker. A single spotlight pierced the darkness, and there she was, black lace and trembling skin, a masked girl clutching the pole like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She looked terrified, lost, completely out of place among the confident dancers who owned these stages. She had no technique, no rhythm, no idea what she was doing. And Stefano couldn't breathe. Honey gold hair spilled over bare shoulders. Big green eyes glittered behind that black lace mask. He could see them even from here, wide and frightened. Soft curves wrapped in sheer fabric. Innocence radiating from every trembling inch of her. His body stirred. For the first time in 3 years, his body responded. He gripped the armrest so hard the leather creaked. What the hell was happening? "Bring her to me." His voice came out rougher than he intended. Andre straightened instantly. "Now, send her to my private room." The black door opened, and Alexandra was pushed inside. The room was dim, expensive, all leather and shadow, and there, sitting on a couch like a king on his throne, was him, the man from outside, the one who'd looked at her like she was invisible. Her heart stopped. "Come closer." His voice was velvet wrapped around a blade. She couldn't move. Her legs had turned to stone, every instinct screaming at her to run, but something in those grey eyes held her captive. He rose slowly, each movement deliberate, predatory. He crossed the space between them until he stood close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His fingers reached for her face. She stopped breathing. Slowly, so slowly, he removed the mask. It fell away like a secret exposed, revealing her face. Young, terrified, beautiful. Those storm-grey eyes searched hers. Something flickered in their depths. Surprise, hunger, recognition. His thumb traced her trembling lower lip, gentle, almost reverent. "Who are you?" A whisper, rough, like he was asking himself more than her. She couldn't answer, couldn't think. His face was inches from hers, his breath warm against her mouth, and her whole body was shaking. He leaned closer, closer, his lips hovering over hers. Not touching, just there, a promise and a threat. Then he closed the distance. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't soft. His lips claimed hers with a possessiveness that stole the air from her lungs, his hand fisting in her hair to tilt her head back. She had never been kissed like this, had never been kissed at all, and her body didn't know how to respond except to melt into him, her hands gripping his suit jacket for balance. When he finally pulled back, she was trembling, her lips felt bruised, her mind was spinning. He stared at her for a long, silent moment, then he turned to the door where Mario stood waiting, his face pale. "Send her to my house." Alexandra's blood ran cold. I can't. I only came to dance." Mario grabbed her arm gently, his eyes filled with something like pity. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You can't refuse the boss. When he wants something, he takes it. The only choice you have is whether you walk out or get carried out." The words echoed in her skull as 2 guards escorted her outside. A black Mercedes waited, engine running. The door opened like a mouth. She didn't have a choice. Alexandra climbed into the darkness, the leather seat cold against her bare legs. Then he slid in beside her. The air in the car thickened. He took up all the space, all the oxygen, his presence pressing against her like a physical weight. Those storm-grey eyes fixed on the road ahead. He didn't look at her once. The door slammed shut. The car began to move. Through the tinted window, the lights of Las Vegas blurred like tears. She was trapped in a metal box with the most dangerous man in the city. And he still hadn't said a word. Alexandra's hands pressed tightly between her knees, fingers interlaced as if in prayer. The skimpy dancer's outfit, little more than sequins and sheer mesh, left her feeling exposed, vulnerable, like a lamb being driven to slaughter. Stefano Bruni sat with one arm draped casually along the back of the seat, his long legs stretched out, taking up space like he owned the world. Which, Alexandra was beginning to realize, he probably did. She risked a glance at him from under her lashes. His jaw was set in a hard line, his profile sharp enough to cut glass. She could feel his awareness of her, the way a predator always knows exactly where its prey is. Her nails dug into her palms, leaving crescent marks. What had she gotten herself into? Her stomach churned with dread as the neon lights of Las Vegas gave way to darker roads, then to gates that opened automatically as the car approached. In the front seat, Andre's broad shoulders filled the passenger side. Mario kept his eyes fixed on the road. Nobody spoke. The silence was suffocating. The car wound up a long driveway lined with palm trees, and then Alexandra saw it, a massive estate sprawling across the desert landscape, lit up like a palace. Beyond it, slightly separated, stood a smaller villa with walls of glass that reflected the moonlight. The Mercedes stopped. Andre was out first, moving around to open her door. Alexandra didn't move. Her legs had turned to concrete. Andre's face appeared in the doorway, his expression surprisingly gentle for a man built like a tank. "You told me it was safe," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You said no harm would come to me." Andre's hand reached out, resting on her shoulder with unexpected warmth. His voice dropped low, meant only for her ears. "Don't be afraid. No one will hurt you here. I give you my word." "Andre!" Stefano's voice cracked like a whip, making Alexandra flinch. He had already stepped out of the car on the other side, straightening his suit jacket with sharp, impatient movements. "Take her upstairs." He didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her existence. "I'll be there shortly." Without another word, he turned and walked toward the main mansion in the distance, his silhouette swallowed by the shadows between the buildings. The villa's interior was everything Alexandra had expected, and nothing like her cramped apartment with its water-stained ceiling and broken heater. Marble floors stretched beneath her bare feet. Somewhere between the club and the car, she'd lost her cheap shoes. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead. Modern art decorated walls that seemed to go on forever. Andre guided her through a living room larger than her entire apartment, past a kitchen with appliances that looked like they'd never been used, and up a sweeping staircase. "What's your name?" His voice was quiet, conversational, as if they were discussing the weather rather than her impending fate. "Alexandra," she swallowed hard. "Alexandra Moore." Her feet slowed on the stairs as she turned to look at him. "Who are you people? Who is he?" Andre paused, his hand resting on the mahogany banister. Something flickered in his eyes, warning, perhaps, or pity. "The Bruni family," he said simply. "That man is Stefano Bruni, my boss." He resumed climbing, and Alexandra had no choice but to follow. He's a good man, but hard, very hard. They reached the top of the stairs, and Andre led her down a hallway lined with closed doors until they stopped at the last one. "Just do what he says. Obey him. And don't ask too many questions." Andre opened the door, revealing a bedroom that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel, king-sized bed with silk sheets, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering Las Vegas skyline, furniture that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. "Go inside. Wait for him there." Andre's eyes met hers, and for a moment, she saw something human beneath the enforcer's mask. He's not as cruel as he seems. Remember that. Then the door closed, and Alexandra was alone. She stood in the center of the room, arms wrapped around herself, trembling despite the warmth. The air smelled faintly of sandalwood and something darker, masculine, expensive. His scent. The minutes stretched into eternity. She was too afraid to sit on the pristine bed, too afraid to touch anything, so she stood there, a half-naked girl in a stranger's bedroom, waiting for a man whose kiss still burned on her lips. The memory hit her without warning, his mouth on hers, demanding and possessive, his hand fisting in her hair. She'd never been kissed before, never been touched by anyone she'd chosen. And despite everything, despite the fear clawing at her throat, her body remembered the heat of him, the way her knees had gone weak, the way she'd melted into him like she belonged there. "Stop it," she murmured to herself, biting her lower lip hard enough to taste copper. "Stop it. He's dangerous. This is wrong." The door opened. Alexandra spun around, her heart slamming against her ribs. Stefano stood in the doorway, his jacket gone, his tie loosened, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. He looked less like a businessman now, and more like what he truly was, a predator who had cornered his prey. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The click of the lock echoed like a gunshot. For a long moment, he simply looked at her. Those grey eyes traveled slowly down her body, the ridiculous outfit, her trembling legs, her bare feet on his expensive carpet. His expression gave nothing away. "Who are you?" His voice was low, controlled. "Why were you dancing at my club?" Alexandra's mouth went dry. "I'm Alexandra. I needed money." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "Everyone needs money. That doesn't explain why a girl who clearly has no idea how to dance was on my stage." She pressed her lips together, fighting the urge to step back. "My roommates stole from me." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. 3 months of savings, rent money. If I don't pay in 3 days, I'm out on the street. Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it, hated showing weakness in front of this man who seemed carved from stone. "I can't go back home. I can't go back to Texas. I'd rather die than go back there." Something shifted in his expression. A flicker of curiosity, perhaps. "Texas. What's in Texas that's worse than the streets of Vegas?" Her throat closed up, words dying before they could form. "My stepfather." The words stuck like broken glass. She couldn't say them, couldn't give voice to those years of locked doors and whispered threats and hands that touched where they shouldn't. Her silence seemed to answer his question anyway. His eyes narrowed slightly, reading things in her face that she hadn't meant to reveal. "Sit down." It wasn't a request. Alexandra sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs finally giving out. Stefano remained standing, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a thick roll of bills. He peeled off several and tossed them onto the bed beside her. $500. Enough for your rent?" Alexandra stared at the money, then at him. I don't understand." "I'm offering you a deal." He moved to the window, his back to her, his reflection ghostly in the dark glass. "You'll live here, in this house. You'll take care of the place, cleaning, cooking, whatever needs to be done. I'll pay you $100 a day." $100 a day. The number echoed in her mind. More than she made in a week at the cafe. "And when I want you..." He turned, those storm-grey eyes pinning her in place. "You'll be mine, in my bed, whenever I call." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Alexandra's stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. "You want me to be your... My arrangement?" His voice was flat, businesslike. "You stay until you've saved enough to start over somewhere else. Then you leave. No strings, no complications." Her chest constricted like a fist closing. He was buying her like she was nothing, like she was a thing. Disgust rose in her throat, but another voice whispered in the back of her mind. $100 a day, a roof over her head, safety from Ray. Was her pride worth more than her survival? Stefano was watching her, waiting. Patient as a cat watching a mouse decide which way to run. "Why me?" she heard herself ask. There were dozens of women at that club. Beautiful women. Experienced women. Why did you choose me? Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, maybe, at her boldness. He was silent for a long moment, his jaw tightening. "That's not your concern." His voice had gone cold again, walls slamming back into place. "Do we have a deal or not?" Alexandra looked at the money on the bed, looked at the room around her, luxury beyond anything she'd ever known, looked at the man who stood before her, beautiful and terrifying and offering her an escape from everything she'd been running from. She bit her lip hard, tasting copper again. This was wrong, so wrong, but she thought of her empty bank account, of the eviction notice waiting on her door, of Ray's face if she ever had to crawl back to Texas. "Yes," she whispered. "We have a deal." Stefano moved before she could prepare herself. One moment he was across the room. The next he was in front of her, his hands cupping her face, tilting it up toward his. His kiss was nothing like the one at the club. That had been demanding, claiming. This was slower, deeper, a brand being pressed into her skin. Alexandra's hands flew to his chest, intending to push him away. But her fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt instead, pulling him closer as heat flooded through her body. She didn't know how to kiss, didn't know what she was doing, but her body seemed to understand things her mind couldn't process. He lowered her back onto the bed, his weight pressing her into the silk sheets. His mouth traced a path down her throat, his hands sliding along her sides, finding the zipper of her ridiculous outfit. She gasped when cool air hit her skin, then gasped again when his lips followed. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. This was happening. This was really happening. She should stop him. She should say something. But the words wouldn't come. Only small sounds she didn't recognize as her own voice. Then his hand slid between her thighs, and reality crashed back. "Wait!" Her voice came out strangled. She grabbed his wrist, stopping him. "Wait, please." Stefano froze above her. His breathing was ragged, his eyes dark with something that made her shiver. "What?" The single word was rough, strained. Alexandra's cheeks burned with shame. Her whole body burned. But she forced the words out anyway, because he deserved to know. Because he would find out eventually. "I'm a virgin." The silence that followed was deafening. Stefano stared down at her, his expression shifting from desire to shock to something she couldn't read. His hand withdrew from between her legs like she'd burned him. He pushed himself up, putting distance between them so suddenly that Alexandra felt cold without his warmth. "What did you say?" "I've never—" She couldn't meet his eyes. "I've never been with anyone. I've never even been kissed before tonight." She waited for him to laugh, to mock her, to call her a liar. Instead, he stood abruptly, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that looked almost desperate. He was breathing hard, his chest rising and falling like he'd been running. He stared at her body still splayed across his sheets, half undressed and trembling, and something warred behind those grey eyes. Then, without a word, he turned and walked out of the room. The door slammed shut behind him. Alexandra lay there in the aftermath, her heart pounding, her body aching with confusion. She didn't understand. She didn't understand any of this. Her hands trembled as she pulled the sheets over her exposed body. Why did he leave? What did she do wrong? But there were no answers. Only the expensive silk sheets beneath her, and the faint scent of sandalwood in the air, and the memory of a man who had looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. She curled into a ball, exhaustion finally winning over fear. Within minutes, despite everything, she was asleep. He stood in the hallway, his back pressed against the wall, his hands shaking. Virgin. The word echoed in his skull like a curse as he ran both hands through his hair. She was a virgin. And now she was lying in his bed, half naked and untouched, and his body was screaming at him to go back in there and take what she'd offered. But he couldn't. His jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. She was innocent. Damaged, yes, running from something obviously, but innocent in the ways that mattered. He wasn't a good man. He'd done things that would make her run screaming if she knew, but this, taking a virgin who had nowhere else to go, who had agreed to his deal out of desperation, even he had limits. His fist slammed against the wall, knuckles splitting. Let her go then. Give her money and send her away. But he couldn't do that either, because when her lips parted under his and her body melted into him, he'd felt alive. She was his cure. He was certain of it now. He just had to figure out how to have her without destroying her in the process. Slowly, quietly, Stefano pushed open the bedroom door. She was asleep, curled up in his sheets like a child, her honey blonde hair spread across his pillow, her face soft and unguarded in slumber. So small, so fragile, so completely at his mercy. He stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her breathe. Something twisted in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation that he refused to name. "What have you done to me?" he murmured, his voice barely a whisper. The question had no answer. He closed the door softly and walked away, leaving her alone in his bed. But he already knew he wouldn't be able to stay away for long. Sunlight stabbed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, dragging Alexandra from sleep. She sat up slowly, disoriented, her body aching in unfamiliar ways. The silk sheets pooled around her waist as she looked around the massive bedroom, the same room where Stefano had kissed her senseless, then walked out without a word. The space beside her was cold, empty. He hadn't come back. Her fingers traced her lips, still feeling the ghost of his mouth on hers. The memory sent warmth spreading through her belly before she could stop it. She shook her head hard, as if that could dislodge the sensation. The bedroom door swung open without warning. Alexandra yanked the sheet up to her chin, her heart slamming against her ribs. But it wasn't Stefano. A middle-aged woman in a crisp uniform stood in the doorway, her expression as warm as a glacier. "Mr. Bruni expects you downstairs in 15 minutes. The woman's eyes swept over Alexandra with barely concealed disdain. "There are clothes in the closet. Dress appropriately." Before Alexandra could respond, the door clicked shut. She found him in the kitchen, if you could call something this massive a kitchen. White marble countertops stretched endlessly, stainless steel appliances gleamed under recessed lighting, and Stefano Bruni sat at the breakfast bar like a king surveying his domain. He didn't look up when she entered. Alexandra smoothed down the simple dress she'd found, navy blue, modest, nothing like the sequined nightmare from the club. Her bare feet were silent on the cold tile as she approached, unsure where to stand, what to do with her hands. "Sit." His voice was flat, emotionless, nothing like the rough whisper that had commanded her to come closer last night. She slid onto the stool across from him, her stomach churning with unease. A plate of food appeared in front of her, eggs, toast, fruit, placed there by the same cold-eyed woman from upstairs. "Eat." Stefano still hadn't looked at her. His attention was fixed on his phone, his thumb scrolling through what looked like financial reports. "Then Rosa will show you your duties." Her eyebrows drew together. "My duties?" Now he looked up. Those grey eyes hit her like a splash of ice water, distant, assessing, utterly devoid of the heat she'd seen last night. "You agreed to take care of this house." His tone suggested she was particularly slow. "Cleaning, cooking, laundry. Rosa will supervise until you learn the standards." Alexandra's jaw tightened despite herself. He was talking to her like she was a servant, less than a servant, like she was a piece of furniture that needed instructions. "I know how to clean," she said quietly, her nails pressing into her thigh under the counter. "We'll see." He returned to his phone, dismissed, done with her. The eggs tasted like sawdust in her mouth. Alexandra learned that the villa had 7 bathrooms, each one bigger than her old apartment's bedroom. She learned that Stefano's shirts had to be arranged by color in his closet, that the kitchen floor had to be mopped twice daily, that fresh flowers were required in the entryway every morning. She learned that Rosa had worked for the Bruni family for 23 years and viewed Alexandra as something between a stray cat and a cockroach. But mostly she learned that Stefano Bruni was a ghost in his own home. He left for business at 9, returned for lunch at 12, ate in silence while she served him, then disappeared again. When evening came, he locked himself in his office on the 2nd floor, the door shut firmly against the world, against her. Alexandra stood in the hallway outside his office, a dinner tray balanced on her hands, her lower lip caught between her teeth. The light glowed under the door, but no sound came from within. She knocked softly. "Mr. Bruni, I brought dinner." Silence stretched for 5 heartbeats, then, "Leave it." She set the tray on the floor and walked away, her chest tight with something she refused to name. He'd kissed her like she was oxygen, looked at her like she was the answer to everything, and now he couldn't even bear to see her face. Her thoughts tangled into knots as she climbed the stairs to her room. Nothing made sense, nothing fit together. Who was the real Stefano Bruni? The man who'd burned her with his touch, or the ice sculpture who couldn't be bothered to meet her eyes? Sleep came slowly that night, and when it did, she dreamed of storm-grey eyes and hands that both worshipped and rejected her. The clock read 2:47 a.m. when thirst dragged her from restless sleep. Alexandra padded down the stairs in the thin nightgown Rosa had provided, white cotton that fell to mid-thigh, practically transparent in the right light. She hadn't thought to grab a robe, hadn't thought about anything except the dryness in her throat and the lingering ache of dreams she didn't want to remember. The kitchen was dark except for the moonlight streaming through the windows, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. She moved quietly to the refrigerator, her bare feet cold against the marble floor, and reached for a bottle of water. You shouldn't walk around like that. Alexandra spun around, her back hitting the refrigerator door with a dull thud, her breath caught in her lungs like a trapped bird. Stefano stood in the doorway. He wore only sleep pants, black, low on his hips, and nothing else. Moonlight carved shadows across his chest, highlighting the ridges of muscle, the dark hair trailing down his stomach. His eyes gleamed in the darkness, fixed on her with an intensity that made goosebumps erupt across her arms. Her voice came out strangled. She swallowed hard, tried again. I was thirsty. He moved toward her, slow, deliberate. Each step closing the distance between them until heat rolled off him in waves, and she caught his scent, smoke and sin, and something that made her pulse stutter. I said. His hand shot out, fingers wrapping around her wrist like a brand. You shouldn't walk around like that. Her pulse hammered where he touched her. Her free arm flew across her chest, trying to cover herself through the thin fabric. I thought no one was awake, sir. Her voice trembled. I didn't mean to. I just needed water. His free hand reached up, and she flinched, but he only brushed a strand of hair from her face, his knuckles grazing her cheek. The gentleness of the gesture, after a day of cold indifference, made her eyes sting. Like you're trying to drive me insane. His voice had dropped to a rasp, rough and strained in ways she didn't fully understand. Like you don't know what you do to me. Her back pressed harder against the cold refrigerator. Sir, I only wore what was left in the closet. I wasn't trying to. I didn't mean to. The words tangled on her tongue. She didn't even know what she was apologizing for. He took another step closer. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Sir, please. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. I don't understand. All day you acted like I don't exist, like I'm invisible. And now you're... She trailed off, not knowing how to finish, not knowing what any of this meant. Was she a servant? A prisoner? Something else entirely? The confusion made her chest ache. You look at me like... She swallowed hard, her fingers twisting the hem of her nightgown. And then you treat me like I'm nothing, like I'm just furniture. I don't know what you want from me, sir. I don't know what I'm supposed to be. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Pain, maybe. Or hunger. She couldn't tell anymore. You want to know what I want? His voice was raw, stripped of its usual control. She nodded, not trusting her voice. His control shattered. His mouth crashed into hers, hungry and demanding, swallowing the small sound that escaped her throat. One hand fisted in her hair, yanking her head back to deepen the angle, while the other gripped her hip hard enough to bruise. He kissed her like he was starving, and she was the only thing that could save him, teeth grazing her lower lip, tongue claiming her mouth, breath hot and ragged against her skin. Her body betrayed her, leaning into his orbit before her mind could object. Her hands found his chest, to push him away, she told herself, but her fingers curled against his warm skin instead, feeling the rapid thunder of his heartbeat beneath her palm. He groaned against her lips, and the sound vibrated through her entire body. Then his hands were on her thighs, lifting her like she weighed nothing. Her legs wrapped around his waist instinctively, her arms circling his neck to keep from falling. He carried her through the dark house, his mouth never leaving hers, kissing her like she was air and he'd been drowning. He laid her down on the black silk sheets, then hovered over her, one hand braced beside her head, the other tracing the line of her jaw. His fingers moved slowly, deliberately, down her cheek, along her throat, across her collarbone. Every touch left fire in its wake, and Alexandra's breath came in shallow gasps she couldn't control. "The deal we made." His voice was rough, strained. His hand slid lower, resting on the curve of her hip, thumb drawing circles through the thin cotton. "Do you remember it?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. His palm was burning through the fabric, branding her skin. "I need to hear you say it." He leaned closer, his lips brushing her ear. His other hand cupped her face, tilting it toward him. "Will you honor our arrangement? Will you be mine?" His fingers traced down her side, settling on her waist. The heat of his touch made her shiver despite the warmth of the room. "If you say no." His thumb stroked along her hip bone, and liquid heat pooled low in her belly. "I'll have my driver take you home. Right now. No consequences. No debt." Alexandra's mind screamed at her to think. This was her chance to escape, to walk away from this dangerous man and his cold, hot games and his hands that seemed to know exactly where to touch her. But her body had already betrayed her. Every nerve ending was alive, singing with a need she'd never experienced. His fingers on her hip, his breath on her neck, the weight of him above her. It was too much, and not enough all at once. She was desperate. That was the truth she clung to. She had nowhere else to go, no money, no options. This was survival. But beneath that desperation, something else stirred, something that had nothing to do with deals or debts or fear. A hunger that had crept up on her when she wasn't looking, wrapping around her like smoke until she couldn't tell where the need ended and the wanting began. His hand moved again, sliding up her ribcage, and her back arched off the mattress before she could stop it. "Yes." The word tore from her throat. "I'll be yours." Something shifted in his dark eyes. Triumph and relief and something almost like tenderness. He lowered his mouth to hers again, but this time the kiss was different. Slower, deeper, like he was savoring her. "You're shaking," he murmured against her lips, pulling back just enough to look at her face. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. "Are you afraid?" Alexandra swallowed past the tightness in her throat. Her fingers fidgeted with the hem of her nightgown, twisting the fabric. "A little." He sat on the edge of the bed, his weight dipping the mattress toward him. "I won't hurt you." His thumb traced her jawline, feather light. "Do you believe me?" She shouldn't. Nothing about this situation should inspire trust. A mafia boss, a forced arrangement, a man who ran hot and cold like a broken faucet. But when he looked at her like that, like she was the only thing in his entire world that mattered. "Yes," she breathed. "I believe you." He exhaled slowly, tension draining from his shoulders. Then he lowered himself over her and kissed her again, softer this time, slower. His hands found the hem of her nightgown. "This needs to come off. Is that okay?" She nodded and lifted her arms. Cool air hit her bare skin, and she fought the urge to cover herself. "Beautiful." The word sounded like it had been dragged from somewhere deep inside him. Heat flooded her cheeks. No one had ever said it like that, like it hurt them to say it. When his mouth trailed down her throat, she arched into him. When his lips found the curve of her breast, a sound escaped her, something between a gasp and a moan. "That's it," he whispered. "Let me hear you." Stefano was patient, unbearably patient. He learned what made her gasp, what made her shiver, watched her face for any sign of discomfort, and when he finally slid inside her, he held perfectly still, his forehead pressed to hers, his eyes locked onto hers, holding her captive. "Look at me." His voice was raw, commanding. "Don't look away. Give yourself to me, all of you." There was pain, brief, sharp, but his gaze never left hers, and somehow that made it bearable. The pain faded, replaced by a fullness she'd never experienced. Her teeth sank into her lower lip. A small whimper escaped her throat. "Good girl," he breathed, his forehead pressing against hers. "You're mine now. Only mine." He began to move, slow at first, then faster when she wrapped her legs around his waist and pulled him deeper. Heat built in her core, spiraling tighter until she thought she might shatter. "Let go!" His voice was wrecked. "I've got you." She broke apart in his arms, pleasure crashing through her in waves. He followed moments later, her name torn from his throat like a prayer. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the darkness. Stefano's arm was heavy across her waist, his face buried in her hair, and Alexandra felt something dangerous blooming in her chest, something soft and warm and terrifying. "Stay," he murmured against her neck. "Tonight. Stay here." She should ask questions, should demand to know why he'd spent all day pretending she didn't exist only to devour her in the dark, should protect herself from whatever game he was playing. Instead, she closed her eyes and let sleep pull her under, her body still humming with the aftermath of pleasure. Questions could wait until morning. Morning came with brutal clarity. Alexandra woke alone in Stefano's massive bed, the sheets beside her cold and empty. Sunlight streamed through windows she didn't remember having curtains, and for a moment she didn't know where she was. Then the memories crashed back, the kitchen, his mouth on hers, the things he'd done to her body, and heat flooded her face. She found her nightgown draped over a chair and pulled it on quickly, suddenly desperate to find him, to see his face, to know if last night had meant something or if she'd made a terrible mistake. He was in the kitchen, already dressed in a crisp suit, already absorbed in his phone, already wearing that mask of cold indifference she'd come to recognize. Her footsteps slowed, her stomach dropped like an elevator with cut cables. "There's breakfast on the counter." He didn't look up. "Rosa has a list of tasks for you today. I expect them completed before dinner." Alexandra stood frozen in the doorway, her heart cracking along fault lines she hadn't known existed. After everything, after the way he'd touched her, held her, whispered her name like it meant something, this was what she got? Orders and avoidance? Her teeth sank into her lower lip, that nervous habit she couldn't break. "Sir?" Her voice came out smaller than she wanted. He finally looked at her, and she searched his face for any trace of the man from last night, any warmth, any recognition of what they'd shared. Nothing. Just ice. Was there something else? His tone suggested she was wasting his valuable time. Pressure built behind her eyes, but she refused to let the tears fall. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. "No." She straightened her spine, lifted her chin. "Nothing at all." She turned and walked away before he could see her face crumple. Stefano watched her go, his jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached. His hand moved to his hair, that restless habit, pushing the straight brown strands back from his forehead. He did it again and again, as if the motion could untangle the chaos in his head. Every instinct screamed at him to call her back, to apologize for the coldness, to explain that he didn't know how to do this, whatever this was. That last night had been the first time in 3 years his body had worked properly, and it terrified him more than any rival family or federal investigation ever had. But explaining would mean vulnerability. Vulnerability meant weakness. And Stefano Bruni could not afford to be weak. His phone buzzed with a message from Andre. "Your mother called. She wants to discuss the Romano arrangement." The Romano arrangement. Bianca Romano, daughter of the family his parents had been trying to merge with for years. Beautiful, sophisticated, from their world. Everything a Bruni wife should be. Everything Alexandra was not. He closed his eyes and immediately saw green eyes looking up at him in the darkness, heard her voice whispering, "Don't stop," like he was her salvation instead of her captor. His hand moved to his chest, pressing against the strange ache that had taken up residence there. She was supposed to be a cure, a solution to his problem. Nothing more. So why did the look on her face when he'd dismissed her feel like a knife between his ribs? His phone buzzed again. Business, responsibilities, the empire that demanded his attention. He stood, straightened his tie, and walked out the door. But for the first time in years, leaving felt like running away. 5 days passed. 5 days of the same maddening pattern. Days belonged to the Ice King, cold orders, colder silences, eyes that looked through her like she was made of glass. Alexandra cleaned, cooked, served, and existed as nothing more than furniture in his pristine world. But nights belonged to someone else entirely. Every night, sometime after midnight, her bedroom door would open. He never knocked, never asked, just appeared in the darkness, and her traitorous body responded before her mind could object. He kissed every inch of her, throat, collarbone, hip, thigh, whispered that she was his, that he'd kill anyone who touched her. And when he reached his peak, her name tore from his lips like a drowning man's last breath. But every morning, this passionate lover turned to ice, looked through her like she didn't exist. On the 6th morning, Rosa appeared in the kitchen with news that made Alexandra's stomach churn. "Mr. Bruni is hosting a business meeting tonight." Rosa's cold eyes swept over her with familiar disdain. "You'll serve drinks. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't make eye contact with the guests. And for God's sake, don't embarrass him." Her teeth sank into her lower lip. "Yes, ma'am." "Wear the black dress, the modest one." Rosa paused at the doorway, something flickering in her expression. "These men, they're not like Mr. Bruni. Be careful." The warning settled in Alexandra's stomach like a stone. The villa transformed that evening. Men in expensive suits filled the living room, 10, maybe 12 of them. They spoke in low voices, laughed at jokes Alexandra couldn't hear, and looked at her like wolves sizing up prey. She moved through the room with a tray of whiskey glasses, keeping her eyes down, her movements small and quiet. Just furniture, just background, invisible. Stefano sat at the head of the gathering, his presence commanding even in stillness. He hadn't looked at her once since the meeting began, as if last night hadn't happened, as if his hands hadn't mapped every inch of her body just hours ago. Her chest constricted, but she pushed the feeling down. Later. She could fall apart, later. "Hey, sweetheart." Alexandra froze mid-step. A hand closed around her wrist. Thick fingers, sweaty grip, too tight. The man who'd grabbed her was heavy-set, his face flushed with alcohol, his smile showing too many teeth. He pulled her closer, and the smell of whiskey and cigar smoke made her stomach roll. "You're a pretty little thing." His other hand reached for her waist. "What do you say we find somewhere private?" Her blood turned to ice. She tried to pull away, but his grip tightened, bruising. "Sir, please." Her voice came out strangled. "I'm just serving drinks." He laughed. "I like that. Makes it more fun when you finally—" The crack of bone against bone silenced the room. Alexandra stumbled backward as the man released her, crashing to the floor with blood streaming from his nose. Stefano stood over him, his knuckles split and bleeding, his chest heaving with barely contained fury. She'd never seen him like this. The Ice King was gone, replaced by something feral and dangerous and terrifying. "Don't." Stefano's voice was low, deadly calm despite the violence vibrating through his body. "Touch what's mine." The silence that followed was absolute. Every man in the room had gone still, eyes wide, hardly breathing. "Get out, all of you. Meeting's over." No one argued. The room emptied in seconds, men grabbing coats and briefcases, giving Alexandra a wide berth. The heavyset man was half carried out by 2 others, still bleeding, still stammering apologies. Then they were alone. Stefano stood with his back to her, shoulders rigid, his bleeding hand hanging at his side. His other fist clenched and unclenched, fighting for control. "Sir," Alexandra's voice was barely a whisper. "Your hand. Go to your room." The words hit her like a slap. After what just happened, after he'd defended her, claimed her in front of everyone, this was what she got? "But your hand is bleeding, let me—" "I said go." She flinched at the steel in his voice. Her eyes burned, but she refused to let the tears fall. Not here. Not in front of him. She turned and walked away on legs that barely held her. Hours passed. Alexandra lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over. Don't touch what's mine. He'd called her his, in front of everyone. He'd broken a man's nose for touching her. And then he'd sent her away like she was nothing. The door opened. She sat up quickly, her heart slamming against her ribs. Stefano stood in the doorway, his hand now bandaged, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled from how many times he'd pushed it back. He didn't speak, just crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulled her to her feet, and kissed her. This wasn't like the other nights. There was no patience, no slow build. This was desperate, hungry. His hands were everywhere, her hair, her face, her waist, like he was trying to reassure himself she was real. I could have killed him. The words were rough against her throat. When he touched you, I wanted to kill him. Her fingers curled into his shirt. Why? He pulled back just enough to look at her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Vulnerability, raw and exposed and terrifying. Because you're mine. His thumb traced her cheekbone. No one touches what's mine. He kissed her again, and she let herself drown in it. Let herself believe just for a moment that the words meant something. Later, much later, they lay tangled in her sheets, her head on his chest, his arm heavy across her back. His heartbeat was steady under her ear, slowing from the frenzy of before. She should feel safe. She did feel safe, safer than she'd ever felt in her life. No man had ever protected her like that. Not her father, who'd left, not her stepfather, who'd done the opposite of protecting. But safety wasn't the same as being valued. And that's what burned. Alexandra pushed herself up, pulling the sheet around her body. Something hard and sharp rose in her chest, something that had been building for days. Mr. Bruni. He opened his eyes, surprised by the formal address. What? I'm not a thing. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. I'm not property. I'm not furniture. I'm a human being. He sat up slowly, his brow furrowing. What are you? I accepted this arrangement because I was desperate. She felt her hands trembling, but forced herself to continue. I had nowhere to go. No money, no options. But that doesn't mean anyone can treat me like I'm nothing. His jaw tightened. I just broke a man's face for touching you. Yes, because I'm yours. The word tasted bitter. Like a car, like a watch, like something you own. Her teeth sank into her lower lip, fighting the tears. Let me go, please. I can't do this anymore. Something flickered in his eyes. He moved faster than she could react, one hand catching her wrist, pulling her toward him until she was pressed against his bare chest. You want to leave? His voice was low, dangerous. His mouth found her neck. She gasped, her body arching into him despite everything her mind was screaming. That's not what I meant. Her voice broke. I want to know if this means something to you. He pulled back to look at her, grey eyes dark with something she couldn't name. No woman has ever made me feel like this. The words were rough, almost torn from him. No one. In my entire life. You're driving me insane. Do you understand that? Her heart hammered. Then why do you treat me like... He kissed her, deep, consuming, stealing every thought from her head. God help her, she wanted him. She hated herself for it, but she did. How could she walk away from the first man who'd ever made her feel safe, even if daylight would bring the Ice King back? I hate you, she whispered against his mouth, even as her legs wrapped around him. I know. He thrust into her and she cried out, Hate me all you want. His lips brushed her ear. You're still mine. His mouth found her neck. She gasped, her body arching into him despite everything her mind was screaming. That's not what I meant. Her voice broke. I want to know if this means something to you. He pulled back to look at her, grey eyes dark with something she couldn't name. No woman has ever made me feel like this. The words were rough, almost torn from him. No one. In my entire life. You're driving me insane. Do you understand that? Her heart hammered. Then why do you treat me like... He kissed her, deep, consuming, stealing every thought from her head. God help her, she wanted him. She hated herself for it, but she did. How could she walk away from the first man who'd ever made her feel safe, even if daylight would bring the Ice King back? I hate you, she whispered against his mouth, even as her legs wrapped around him. I know. He thrust into her and she cried out, Hate me all you want. His lips brushed her ear. You're still mine. Afterward, she expected to wake up alone. The pattern never changed. Passion in the darkness, cold sheets at dawn. But when her eyes fluttered open, Stefano was still there. He sat on the edge of the bed with his back to her, shoulders tense beneath the pale morning light filtering through the curtains. His head was bowed, hands clasped between his knees, and something about the stillness of him made her breath catch. You're still here. The words came out rough, thick with sleep and surprise. He didn't turn around. For a long moment, he said nothing at all, and Alexandra wondered if he'd even heard her. Then his voice cut through the silence, flat and businesslike, as if they were discussing a contract rather than lying in her rumpled sheets. I want to buy you something. His fingers drummed once against his knee, that restless energy she'd come to recognize. Jewelry, dresses, shoes, whatever you want, name it. Alexandra pushed herself up on her elbows, the sheet slipping down her shoulder as she stared at his rigid back. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, this wasn't even on the list. Her mind scrambled to catch up, to understand what game this was, what he wanted from her now. Her teeth sank into her lower lip, that nervous habit she couldn't break, and the answer came to her before she'd fully thought it through. A laptop. Now he turned. His brow furrowed as his grey eyes found hers, confusion flickering across features that were usually so carefully controlled. A laptop? She nodded, pulling the sheet higher against her chest, suddenly aware of how exposed she was. Not just her body, everything. I need a computer. That's all I want. I'm offering you anything. He studied her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve. Diamonds, designer clothes, a car, and you want a laptop. I don't need diamonds. Alexandra held his gaze, something stubborn rising in her chest. I don't need designer clothes. I just need something that's mine, something I can escape into. The words hung between them, more honest than she'd intended. She waited for him to mock her, to dismiss her, to turn back into the Ice King who treated her like furniture. Instead, something shifted in his expression. The hard line of his jaw softened almost imperceptibly, and the corner of his mouth twitched upward, just barely, just for a second, before he caught himself. He turned away, but not before she saw it. A smile, small and strange and completely unexpected. Done, he said, and left without another word. At noon, the doorbell rang. Alexandra opened it to find Andrei standing on the doorstep, a sleek black box tucked under his arm. His face was as stoic as ever, but something flickered in his dark eyes. Amusement, maybe, or curiosity. From Mr. Bruni. He held out the box, and Alexandra's heart stuttered when she saw the Apple logo embossed on the side. He said you'd know what it was. She took it with trembling fingers, lifted the lid, and felt her breath leave her body in a rush. Inside sat a brand-new MacBook Pro, silver and gleaming, more expensive than anything she'd ever owned in her life. Oh my God! She clutched it to her chest, like a child with a Christmas present, not caring how ridiculous she must look. Oh my God! Andrei let out a sound that might have been a chuckle, which seemed wildly out of character for a man who looked like he could kill someone with his bare hands. What are you going to do with that thing? Alexandra hugged the laptop tighter, and for the first time in days, a real smile broke across her face. Not forced, not polite, real. I'm going to live in a world of my own making. Andrei raised an eyebrow but didn't push. He gave her a single nod, then turned and walked back to the black SUV idling in the driveway. In the back seat, Stefano sat with his phone in hand, pretending to scroll through emails he wasn't reading. He looked up the moment Andrei slid into the driver's seat, and the question came out before he could stop it. What did she say? Andrei glanced in the rearview mirror, and for once there was a crack in his professional mask, a grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. I've never seen anyone that happy over a computer, boss. She looked like you'd given her the moon. Stefano's jaw tightened. He turned to stare out the window, watching the villa shrink in the distance, but his reflection in the glass betrayed him. The ghost of a smile, soft, almost tender. Good. The car pulled onto the main road, and Stefano leaned his head back against the leather seat, closing his eyes. He tried to focus on the meeting ahead, the numbers he needed to review, the calls he had to return, but her face kept filling his mind. The way she bit her lip when she was nervous, the taste of her mouth in the darkness, that soft, wounded look in her eyes whenever he pushed her away, like he'd kicked something small and trusting. Something twisted in his chest, sharp, unfamiliar, dangerous. Get it together. He ran his hand through his hair, pushing the straight brown strands back from his forehead. You can't fall for her. You can't. In the front seat, Andre kept his eyes on the road, but he'd been watching his boss in the mirror, the distraction, the softness, the way Stefano asked about her like he couldn't help himself. Andre had worked for the Bruni family for 15 years. He'd seen Stefano break men's bones without flinching, negotiate deals worth millions without raising his pulse, walk through rooms full of enemies like they were furniture. He'd never seen him like this. Andre said nothing, but inside he was laughing. That night, Alexandra sat cross-legged on her bed with the new laptop glowing in the darkness, its screen the only light in the room. She should sleep. Tomorrow would bring more cleaning, more cold silences, more of the exhausting push and pull that was slowly driving her insane. But the chaos in her head demanded an outlet, and for the first time in weeks, she had one. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She thought about the man who'd given her this gift, who protected her body but wounded her heart, who whispered her name like a prayer in the darkness and looked through her like glass in the light. She thought about how safe she felt in his arms, how invisible she felt everywhere else. And slowly, she began to type. She was nothing to him, just a body, just a way to pass the nights. But beneath his cold words, she'd seen something else. Hunger, obsession, a man fighting demons he refused to name. She should run. Every instinct told her to run. But how do you run from the only person who's ever made you feel safe? The words poured out like blood from a wound. Hours passed, the sky lightening outside her window, and still she wrote, about a woman trapped between her pride and her need, between the man who protected her body and slowly destroyed her heart. When she finally stopped, exhausted and empty and somehow lighter, the document had a title. The Mafia's Obsession, by Mia Harlow. A week later, Rosa informed her that she'd be helping at the main mansion for a dinner party. Alexandra's stomach twisted at the news. She'd managed to avoid the Bruni family estate until now, and something told her that was about to change. The mansion was everything the villa wasn't. Old money dripped from every surface, crystal chandeliers, oil paintings in gilded frames, marble floors that echoed with centuries of secrets. Alexandra felt small the moment she stepped inside, like a stain on pristine white fabric. The staff quarters buzzed with activity. Maids in crisp uniforms prepared silver trays while exchanging gossip in rapid Italian. They fell silent when Alexandra entered, their eyes sweeping over her with barely concealed contempt. "So you're the one?" A thin woman with sharp cheekbones looked her up and down. The Bruni heirs' new pet. Alexandra's cheeks burned, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm here to help with the dinner service." The women exchanged glances, then burst into laughter. One of them pulled out her phone and waved it at the others. "Did you read the new chapter? Mia Harlow updated last night. The part where he finally admits he can't stop thinking about her." She clutched her chest dramatically. "I almost died." "Who?" The thin woman leaned over to look. "Mia Harlow. She's been writing on Velvet Stories platform for like a year, but suddenly everyone's obsessed with her. Her new story, The Mafia's Obsession, is blowing up right now. Started like a week ago." She scrolled through her phone. "It's about this cold, powerful man who keeps a woman trapped in his house. She's supposed to hate him, but the tension between them is insane." Alexandra's fingers went numb. She busied herself folding napkins, keeping her head down, praying no one noticed the flush creeping up her neck. "The way she writes him," another maid sighed. "So cold on the outside, but you can tell he's falling apart inside. And the girl, she's not weak, she fights back. That's what I love about it. Everyone's dying to know who she really is." Before Alexandra could slip away, the door swung open. A woman in her late 50s swept into the room, her silver hair perfectly coiffed, her posture rigid with authority. The maids scattered like startled birds. Maria Bruni, Stefano's mother. Her cold eyes landed on the redhead's phone. "What's that?" "Nothing, Mrs. Bruni, I was just—" Maria snatched it from her hand, glancing at the screen. Her expression shifted, irritation melting into something like interest. She scrolled for a moment, then another, her lips pressing together. "Mia Harlow," she murmured. "Everyone's talking about this writer." She handed the phone back without looking at the maid, her gaze distant. "Interesting." Then her eyes found Alexandra. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Maria studied her the way one might examine an insect. Curious, faintly disgusted, utterly dismissive. Her gaze traveled from Alexandra's worn shoes to her simple dress, lingering just long enough to make her point without saying a word. Then she looked at the thin woman. "My son is marrying Bianca Romano. The announcement will be made at the gala next month." She adjusted her pearl bracelet. "We'll need to redecorate the east wing. Come with me. I want to discuss the arrangements." The thin woman hurried after her, and Maria swept out without acknowledging Alexandra again. But that single look had said everything. "You're nothing. You're temporary. You don't belong here." Alexandra's lips parted. "Married," she breathed, so quiet no one heard. The maid's whispers resumed immediately, but Alexandra couldn't hear them over the roaring in her ears. That night, Alexandra was arranging flowers in the villa's living room when she heard voices. Stefano's voice, and a woman's, low, sultry, unfamiliar. She moved toward the study without thinking, stopping just outside the half-open door. What she saw made her stomach drop. A woman stood inches from Stefano, her body poured into a red dress that left nothing to imagination. Dark hair cascaded over bare shoulders, and her hand rested on his chest, fingers splayed possessively. Bianca Romano. "We both know this marriage makes sense." Bianca's voice was honey and poison. "Your family needs our connections. My family needs your resources." Her hand slid higher. "And I've wanted you since I was 16, Stefano. Don't pretend you haven't noticed." Alexandra's hands trembled around the water glasses she was carrying. She should leave. She should turn around and walk away and pretend she'd never seen. The tray slipped from her shaking fingers and crashed to the floor. Crystal exploded across marble, water spraying in every direction, the sound shattering the intimacy of the room like a gunshot. Both heads snapped toward the doorway. Bianca's eyes narrowed. "What the hell?" Alexandra dropped to her knees, scrambling to collect the broken pieces. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to—" "Stop!" Bianca's heels clicked against the floor as she approached, stopping inches from Alexandra's trembling hands. "This is a private conversation. You're a servant. You should know your place." Her lip curled. "Get out." Alexandra looked up at Stefano, waiting for him to say something, to defend her, to acknowledge that she was more than just the help. He stood perfectly still, his face carved from stone. He said nothing. The silence cut deeper than Bianca's words ever could. Alexandra rose on shaking legs, glass cutting into her palm. She didn't feel it, couldn't feel anything except the cold spreading through her chest. "Excuse me," she whispered, and fled. She made it to her room before the tears came, hot, angry, humiliating. She pressed her bleeding hand against her mouth to muffle the sobs. Stupid, stupid girl. She'd known what she was, known it from the beginning, and still she'd let herself hope. The door opened without warning. Stefano stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, his jaw tight. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "Alexandra." "No." She stepped back, holding up her bleeding hand like a shield. "Don't touch me." He moved toward her, but she retreated further. "I said no." Her voice cracked. "You just stood there. She told me to get out, and you said nothing." Something flickered in his eyes. "Bianca means nothing." "Then why didn't you say anything?" Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Why did you let her treat me like that?" Stefano ran his hand through his hair, that restless habit. "It's complicated, Alexandra. You keep reminding me that I don't matter to you." Her voice was cold now, the tears still falling but something harder underneath. "Fine. I'll stay 1 more month, save a little more money. Then I'm leaving. Away from you." His jaw tightened. "So, I'm just money to you." Alexandra laughed, a broken, bitter sound. "And I'm just the bed you visit at night to satisfy yourself." The words hung between them like a blade. Stefano moved before she could react. His hand caught her wrist, spinning her around, and his mouth crashed into hers. The kiss was desperate, almost painful. He pulled back just enough to press his forehead against hers, his breathing ragged. "You're not nothing." His voice was raw. "You're not a secret. You're—" He stopped, jaw working. "I've never wanted anyone the way I want you. Only you. No one else exists when you're in the room." "Then prove it." Her hands fisted in his shirt. "Stop treating me like I'm disposable." He kissed her again, softer this time, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious. "I'm trying," he whispered against her lips. "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be this. But I know I can't let you leave." She should push him away. She knew she should. But when his fingers found the hem of her shirt, she lifted her arms. When he shed his own clothes and pressed his bare skin against hers, she pulled him closer. When he lifted her and carried her to the bed, she let him. And when he moved inside her, she held on like he was the only solid thing in a world made of water. Afterward, she drifted toward sleep, exhausted and confused, and stupidly, dangerously hopeful. She didn't know how much time had passed when she felt it, fingers brushing through her hair, slow and gentle. A kiss pressed to her cheek, feather light. "I love your scent." Stefano's voice was low, almost to himself. "Even when I'm away from you, it's still in my nose. Soap and jasmine, like a fresh flower." His lips grazed her temple. "It lightens all my darkness." Alexandra kept her breathing steady, afraid to move, afraid to break whatever spell had made him soft like this. Then his hand stilled in her hair. "This scent." His voice changed, something clicking into place. "That girl. Was it you? That first night outside Velvet Noir, the girl I bumped into at the door." Her teeth sank into her lower lip. She turned to face him, the sheet falling from her shoulder. "Yes?" His grey eyes searched her face. "You looked at me like I was nothing that night." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Like I didn't exist. I was blind." His thumb traced her cheekbone, and his gaze, it was soft, open, almost loving. "And now," he kissed her, deep and slow and aching with something neither of them could name. Alexandra's hand shot out, fingers closing around his wrist. The word escaped before she could stop it, the first time she'd ever used it. "Stefano." He froze. "I can't bear the thought of you with someone else." Her voice trembled. "I can't. It would destroy me." Something shifted in his expression. The softness hardened. He pulled back, sitting up on the edge of the bed, his back to her. "You don't control me, Alexandra." His voice was cold now, that familiar ice returning. "Do you know who I am? What kind of man I am?" He stood, reaching for his shirt. I control everything. Everyone. She watched him dress, her heart cracking with each button he fastened. He paused at the door, still not looking at her. I told you I don't want any other woman but you. His voice was flat, final. My word should be enough. The door closed behind him. Alexandra stared at the ceiling, her body still warm from his touch, her chest hollow from his words. He'd given her everything and nothing in the span of minutes. But this time, instead of crying, she reached for her laptop. Chapter 12, she typed. The breaking point. If he wouldn't give her a voice, she'd create her own. 2 months in this villa, and the nausea hit her 3 mornings in a row. Alexandra waited until Stefano left for his meetings before slipping out to the pharmacy, her hands trembling as she bought the test she'd been dreading. Back in the bathroom, she set it on the counter and counted her breaths like prayers. But deep in her bones she already knew what those 2 pink lines would tell her. Pregnant. She was carrying Stefano Bruni's child, the man who treated her like a queen at night and a ghost by day, the man whose engagement to Bianca Romano would be announced at the gala in 15 days. She sank to the bathroom floor, pressing her palms against her still flat stomach, caught between terror and wonder. What am I going to do? The news that would change everything arrived that afternoon. Her phone buzzed with an email from Velvet Stories, and Alexandra's breath caught as she read the words. Dear Mia Harlow, we are thrilled to inform you that your story, The Mafia's Obsession, has won our quarterly competition. Your prize of $20,000 will be deposited within 5 to 7 business days. $20,000. She read the number 3 times, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. 20,000. Enough for rent, for a security deposit, for months of survival while she figured out her next move. Enough to leave. Her hand drifted to her stomach as the realization crystallized. She had money now, real money earned through her own words. She didn't need Stefano's $100 a day anymore. Didn't need to warm his bed while he planned a wedding with another woman. The decision made itself. Stefano wouldn't return until evening, so Alexandra packed quickly, only the clothes she'd arrived with, leaving behind every silk blouse and designer dress that felt like payment for services. She kept the laptop. It was the one thing he'd given her that had actually set her free. At the threshold of his bedroom, she paused. The sheets still held the impression of their tangled bodies, still carried his scent, sandalwood and something darker that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Her throat tightened, but she forced herself to turn away. You can't raise a child in the shadows of his real life. She left no note. What was there to say? At the gate, Alexandra turned for one last look at the villa. 2 months ago, she'd stepped through these doors terrified and desperate, a girl running from one nightmare into another. Could she have known then that she'd fall so completely for this cold, complicated man, that she'd carry his child while he married someone else? But great love stories only happened in fiction. Now it was time to face reality. She climbed into the taxi without looking back again. Stefano knew something was wrong the moment he stepped through the door. The villa was too quiet, missing the subtle sounds of her presence he'd grown addicted to without realizing. Alexandra? Silence. He moved through the rooms with growing dread, and when he reached the bedroom closet, his worst fear confirmed itself. Her clothes were gone, not the designer pieces he'd bought, but the worn jeans and faded shirts that were actually hers. On the nightstand, her pillow still held the indent of her head. He brought it to his face, and her scent hit him like a physical blow. Soap and jasmine, the smell that lightened all his darkness. Gone. Fury and panic warred inside his chest as he crossed to the bathroom mirror and stared at the wild-eyed man looking back. His fist connected with the glass before he made the conscious decision, the mirror exploding into shards, blood blooming across his knuckles. His phone was in his hand before the last piece hit the floor. Andre, get every man we have. Bus stations, airports, train terminals, her old apartment, every cheap motel in 50 miles. Boss? What happened? She's gone. The words tasted like ash. Alexandra is gone. What do you want when we find her? Stefano's grip tightened until the phone creaked. 3 years he'd been unable to feel anything, trapped in a body that had betrayed him. And then she'd appeared and fixed him, made him whole. Now she'd vanished like smoke. Find her. His voice dropped to something dangerous. Turn this city upside down. I don't care what it takes. He ended the call and stood alone, surrounded by broken glass and the ghost of her perfume. I will find you, Alexandra. A whisper carrying absolute certainty, even if I have to tear apart every corner of this country. And when he did, he was never letting her go. 3 days without her, and Stefano was losing his mind, sitting in the dark with a half-empty bottle of whiskey, her ghost haunting every corner, the couch where she'd curled up with her laptop, the kitchen where he'd first taken her, the bedroom that still carried her scent no matter how many times he changed the sheets. His men had searched every bus station, every airport, every train terminal in Nevada. Nothing. Andre appeared in the doorway. Boss, your mother is here. Stefano didn't move. Tell her I'm busy. She's already inside. Maria Bruni swept into the room, her sharp eyes taking in the whiskey bottle, the disheveled appearance of her usually immaculate son. Disappointment hardened her features. Look at yourself. She stopped in front of him with her arms crossed. Drinking in the dark over some girl? This isn't who you are, Stefano. He swirled the whiskey without looking up. You don't know who I am. I know exactly who you are. The heir to this family, with responsibilities that don't disappear because some woman ran off. She sat across from him. The gala is in 12 days. Bianca's family is expecting an announcement. A muscle ticked in his cheek. There won't be an announcement. Maria's eyebrow rose. Excuse me? I'm not marrying Bianca Romano. Not now, not ever. He finally looked at his mother, and something in his expression made her flinch. Her composure cracked before she recovered. This is about that girl, isn't it? The dancer from some cheap club. Her lip curled. You can't possibly be serious. Her name is Alexandra. Low and dangerous, and I've never been more serious about anything in my life. She stood abruptly, heels clicking against the marble. You've lost your mind. The Romano partnership is worth millions. I don't care. You're throwing everything away for a nobody. I said I don't care. He rose with sudden violence, and Maria took a step back from her own son. I'll marry who I want, love who I want, and no one will tell me otherwise. Maria stared at him like she was seeing a stranger. The cold, controlled son she'd raised replaced by something raw and desperate. Your father will hear about this, she said finally, her voice tight with barely contained fury. Good. Send him in. Victor Bruni arrived an hour later. Your mother told me everything. He settled into a chair across from his son. You want out of the Romano arrangement. Fine, but business doesn't stop because of your feelings. Stefano leaned forward. I have other connections, legitimate contacts who can replace what the Romanos offer. Give me time. The gala is in less than 2 weeks. Stefano's grip tightened on the glass. I know. Victor studied him for a long moment. Find your alternative. You have until the gala. But if you can't deliver, business comes first. He stood. It always has. He left without waiting for a response. Across the city, Alexandra was building a new life. The prize money had been enough for a small studio apartment, nothing fancy, but it was hers. She'd cried the first night, missing him so fiercely it felt like a physical wound, but by morning something had shifted. She had her laptop, her stories, and a baby growing inside her. The platform's partnership offer arrived 3 days later, monthly salary, benefits, her name featured on their homepage. She accepted without hesitation. And then Mia Harlow exploded. It started with an online article, The Mystery Author Taking Romance Readers by Storm. Then TikTok, readers filming their reactions to The Mafia's Obsession, mascara running, captioning it, Mia Harlow ruined me. Within a week, hashtag Mia Harlow was trending nationally. Alexandra watched from her tiny apartment, hand on her stomach. If only they knew that every word was real. At the Bruni mansion, Maria was scrolling through her phone with unusual intensity. "Have you heard of this Mia Harlow?" she asked her assistant. "Everyone's talking about her, some anonymous writer whose story is everywhere." "Oh yes, ma'am. The Mafia's obsession. Complete mystery who she is." Maria's eyes lit up with opportunity. "The gala is in 12 days. What better way to create buzz than revealing the most talked-about author in the country?" She was already typing. "Get me the CEO of Velvet Stories. I want Mia Harlow revealed live on stage." The irony was delicious. Maria was about to invite the girl she'd dismissed as a nobody to be the star of her own party. That night, Andre knocked on Stefano's study door. "Boss." Something in his voice made Stefano look up immediately. "We found her." Every muscle in Stefano's body went still. "Where?" "Small apartment on the east side. Moved in 4 days ago. Paid cash." Andre shifted his weight. "She's been getting visitors from Velvet Stories. Business meetings." Stefano was already reaching for his jacket. "Give me the address." "Boss?" Andre stepped closer, lowering his voice. "She left for a reason." Stefano's hand froze on the jacket. "The address, Andre." Their eyes met, and Andre swallowed his objection. He handed over a slip of paper. Stefano looked at it. Just an address, but it might as well have been salvation. "Don't follow me. I'm going alone." Mark Wilson from Velvet Stories arrived at Alexandra's apartment that evening with a briefcase full of contracts and an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry to come at this hour, Miss Harlow." He spread the papers across her small kitchen table. "But the timeline is tight. The partnership terms are generous. Monthly salary, health benefits, 15% of merchandise revenue in exchange for your next 3 novels. He paused. "And your appearance at the Bruni family gala in 10 days for the big reveal." Alexandra's blood ran cold at the name. The Bruni Gala? The platform's parent company is owned by Apex Media Holdings, which belongs to the Bruni family. They're hosting the reveal, and Maria Bruni personally requested it. The Brunis own Velvet Stories. The realization hit her like a truck. She'd been writing for Stefano's family this entire time without knowing it, pouring her heart onto a platform they controlled. "I can't go to that gala," she said, struggling to keep her voice steady. "It's non-negotiable, I'm afraid. The reveal is the cornerstone of our marketing campaign." Mark gathered the unsigned contracts with a practiced gesture. "Think about it, and I'll come back tomorrow for your answer." She walked him to the door with her mind spinning through implications, and they were shaking hands in the doorway when a black car screeched to a stop at the curb and Stefano stepped out. His eyes locked onto Mark's hand, still clasping Alexandra's, something murderous flickering across his face, and he crossed the distance in 3 strides before his fist connected with Mark's jaw. Mark crumpled against the doorframe, blood blooming from his split lip. "Mr. Bruni, it was just a business meeting, just contracts. Get out!" Stefano's voice was ice wrapped around violence. "If I ever see you near her again, I'll break more than your face." Mark scrambled to his feet and fled to his car without looking back, tires squealing as he tore away from the curb. Alexandra's vision blurred at the edges as stress, shock, and pregnancy hormones combined into a perfect storm. "Stefano, what are you doing?" The world tilted sideways, and everything went black. She woke on her own couch with Stefano kneeling beside her, his face pale with concern as his hand pressed against her forehead. "You fainted. When did you last eat or sleep?" "Alexandra, you look like you haven't taken care of yourself in days. What are you doing here?" She pushed herself upright, putting distance between them. "How did you find me?" "Did you really think I wouldn't?" His jaw tightened with something between anger and hurt. "I've been looking for you since the moment I realized you were gone." Before she could respond, a violent pounding shook her apartment door, followed by a voice she'd hoped never to hear again. Slurred, furious, terrifyingly familiar. "Alexandra! I know you're in there. Open this goddamn door!" All the blood drained from her face as memories she'd buried for years came flooding back. "No, no, no!" The door burst open with the cheap lock splintering, and Ray stumbled inside. Her stepfather, drunk and disheveled and radiating the same menace she remembered from her teenage years. His bloodshot eyes found her immediately. 2 months I've been looking for you. He advanced into the room with his fists clenched at his sides. "Your mother told me you sent money, told me you said she should leave me. You think you can run from me? Think you can tell her to leave me?" Stefano stepped between them, his body a wall of barely contained violence. "Get out!" Ray squinted at him with the particular belligerence of a drunk man too stupid to recognize danger. "Who the hell are you?" "The man who's going to kill you if you take one more step toward her." Ray lunged, and what happened next was too fast for Alexandra to track. Stefano intercepting the charge, a brutal exchange of blows, Ray hitting the floor with blood streaming from his nose. Then Andre was there, materializing from nowhere, dragging Ray up by his collar and slamming him against the wall with practiced efficiency. "Boss?" Andre's voice was calm, professional, as if this were just another day at the office. "What do you want me to do with him?" Stefano looked at Alexandra with something unreadable in his eyes before turning back to Andre. "Take him somewhere quiet and make sure he understands that if he ever comes near her again, he won't walk away." Andre nodded once and hauled Ray out of the apartment, leaving the door hanging broken on its hinges. Silence filled the apartment as Alexandra stood frozen, trembling, the memories she'd spent years trying to bury clawing their way to the surface. "Alexandra." Stefano moved toward her with his hands raised like she was a wounded animal. "You're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore. Don't." She stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself like armor. "Don't act like you're my savior when you're the reason I ran in the first place. I didn't make you leave. You chose to disappear without a word. Because you were marrying someone else." The words tore out of her with all the pain she'd been carrying. "Because your mother looked at me like I was dirt on her shoe. Because I was never going to be anything more than your dirty secret, the girl you visited at night while you built a life with someone else." Stefano's expression hardened into something dangerous. "You're coming back with me. Now." "No." She stood her ground even though her legs were shaking beneath her. "You don't own me, Stefano. You never did." His hand slammed against the wall so hard the plaster cracked, dust raining down like snow. "Do you have any idea what these past days have been like? I can't sleep, can't think, can't function without you." "That's not my problem anymore." "Then make it your problem." He grabbed her arms and pulled her close until she could feel his heart pounding against her chest. "I'm not leaving without you." Something inside her snapped, all the pain and love and fury she'd been holding back exploding at once. "Then kill me." Her voice broke on the words. "If you won't love me properly, if you won't choose me openly, if I'm just going to be the woman you visit at night while you marry someone else, then put me out of my misery, because I won't live like that. I won't." Stefano went completely still, his grip loosening on her arms as her words hit him like physical blows. "I love you." His voice cracked, actually cracked, the first time she'd ever heard it break. "I'm in love with you, Alexandra. I've never felt this way about anyone, never wanted anyone the way I want you. You're the first woman in 3 years who made me feel anything." "What?" The word escaped as barely a whisper. 3 years of nothing, no desire, no connection, no feeling at all. Until you. He pressed his forehead against hers, eyes squeezed shut. "The way you bite your lip when you're nervous, your scent, soap and jasmine, that haunts me even when you're not there. The way your face changes when you're surprised, like a child seeing snow for the first time. That little sound you make when you sleep." His voice cracked. "Your dignity, your innocence, the way you're nothing like any woman I've ever known. No games, no manipulation, no drama, just you." He pulled back to look at her, his grey eyes raw with emotion. "I love everything about you, Alexandra. Everything. And it terrifies me." She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, and when he kissed her, it tasted like salt and desperation, and something that might finally be hope. They didn't make it to the bedroom. He took her against the wall, then on the floor, then finally in her narrow bed, desperate and tender and fierce by turns, until they lay tangled together in the darkness. His hand found her stomach without her guiding it there, and the words escaped before she could stop them. "I'm pregnant." Stefano's entire body went rigid. For a long moment he didn't breathe, Then his hand pressed against her belly, gentle now, reverent. "Mine," he whispered. "You're carrying my child." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. He pulled her closer, his lips brushing her forehead, her eyelids, her cheeks. "Why did you run? Why didn't you tell me?" "I found out the same day you were supposed to announce your engagement to Bianca. I couldn't stay to watch you marry her while I carried your child." His arms tightened around her. "I was never going to marry her, never." They lay in silence for a moment. Then his brow furrowed. "You said the same day. What else happened?" "I won a writing contest. $20,000. That's how I could afford to leave." A slow smile spread across his face. Talented girl. That was it. No follow-up questions. No curiosity about what she wrote, which platform, what the stories were about. Just talented girl, like she was a child who'd won a spelling bee. "He loves me," she thought as he kissed her again. "But does he really see me? Does he respect what I've built?" The doubt lingered, even as she fell asleep in his arms. She woke alone to find a note on the pillow, in his sharp handwriting. "Father called. Emergency. I'll be back tonight. Don't go anywhere." Alexandra stared at the words as something cold settled in her chest. He'd left again, just like every morning at the villa. Passion at night and abandonment at dawn. Nothing has changed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mark Wilson. "The gala offer stands. Final answer needed by tonight." She looked at the note, then at her phone, then at the broken door hanging off its hinges, and for the first time in her life, she made a decision that wasn't about running away or waiting to be saved. Time to stop letting other people write my story. Stefano came back that first night, just as his note had promised, and found her sitting on the edge of her bed with her suitcase still unpacked. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Pack your things. You're coming home with me." Alexandra looked up at him, this man who'd confessed his love just hours ago, who'd held her like she was the only thing keeping him alive. She shook her head slowly. "No, Stefano. I'm staying here, in the apartment I paid for with my own money. I spent months being your secret, disappearing whenever your family came around. I won't do that again." His jaw tightened. "Everything is different now. Then prove it." She stood, her hand moving to her stomach. "Come to me. Not as the man who owns me, but as the man who loves me." For a long moment, neither moved. Then Stefano exhaled, his shoulders dropping as something shifted in his expression, frustration softening into reluctant acceptance. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms without another word. And so the days found their rhythm. He arrived every evening after dark, shedding his armor at her door, the cold mask, the commanding voice, the weight of the Bruni name. In her tiny apartment with its water-stained ceiling and second-hand furniture, he was just Stefano, learning to love a woman who refused to be owned. They fought about his controlling nature and her stubbornness, about baby names and futures neither could predict. But they also laughed, talked for hours, tangled in her narrow bed, made love until the city lights faded into dawn. He still left every morning, old habits died hard, but each night he returned, and each night he stayed a little longer. On the seventh morning, Alexandra woke to an unfamiliar sound, cursing, followed by metal clattering against her kitchen floor. She padded down the hallway and froze in the doorway. Stefano Bruni, the man who made grown men tremble, stood at her stove in yesterday's wrinkled shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, glaring at a smoking pan. Batter dripped down the counter, eggshells littered the floor, and on a chipped plate beside him sat 3 pancakes, lopsided and burned, the most imperfect things she'd ever seen. "You're still here," she said softly. He spun around, spatula raised like a weapon, and she saw something unexpected. Embarrassment coloring his cheeks. The most dangerous man in Las Vegas, blushing over breakfast. He gestured helplessly at the disaster. "I was trying to... Rosa always made it look easy." Alexandra leaned against the doorframe, warmth spreading through her chest. This man who commanded empires, who could buy her entire building without blinking, standing in her cramped kitchen, making her pancakes. She crossed the room, took the spatula from his hand, and pointed at the chair. "Sit." He opened his mouth to protest. "I can do it." She softly kissed him on the cheek. "Please, sit." He sat, watching her salvage what she could, adding fresh batter with practiced ease. When she slid a plate of golden brown pancakes in front of him, he stared like she'd performed a miracle. They ate in comfortable silence, while morning light softened the hard lines of his face. He looked younger like this, almost peaceful. "I love this man," she thought, "and he's trying." But love alone wasn't enough. Tonight, he would finally see all of her. The morning of the gala, Stefano arrived early with a garment bag over his arm, his energy sharp and decisive. He laid the bag across her couch. Emerald silk, designer label. "I brought you something. Get dressed here. We'll arrive together, and I'll introduce you to everyone as my woman." Alexandra glanced at the bag but didn't touch it. "I have my own dress." His brow creased. "This one is better. Stefano." She turned to face him fully, her voice quiet but steady. "When I told you about the prize money, you said 'talented girl' and kissed me. That was it. You never asked what I won for, what I write, which platform. The CEO of Velvet Stories came to my apartment to offer me a partnership, and you punched him without asking why he was there." He tilted his head, something shifting in his expression. Not quite guilt, but close. "You're right. Maybe I did treat something important to you as simple." He rubbed the back of his neck, a rare gesture of discomfort. "I deal with complicated things every day, Alexandra. Life and death decisions, million-dollar deals, enemies who want me buried. A story prize. It didn't register the way it should have. But that doesn't mean I don't respect you." "You don't know I have 500,000 readers." She stepped closer, holding his gaze. "You don't know my pen name, or my most popular story. You've never once been curious about who I am when I'm not with you. Do you actually know me, Stefano? Or do you only see the woman who warms your bed?" His jaw worked, searching for an answer that wouldn't come. "You don't know I have 500,000 readers." She stepped closer, holding his gaze. "You don't know my pen name or my most popular story. You've never once been curious about who I am when I'm not with you. Do you actually know me, Stefano, or do you only see the woman who warms your bed?" Silence stretched between them, thick and heavy. "But soon," she continued softly, "maybe you'll finally have the chance to see me." His confusion hardened, his posture stiffening with that dangerous energy she'd learned to recognize. "Alexandra, what's gotten into you?" He stepped toward her, his voice dropping low. "Do you understand who I am? One word from me and I could erase everything, your apartment, your account, your existence in this city. Doesn't that frighten you?" She didn't step back. "Should I be afraid of you? Is that what love is supposed to feel like?" His finger jabbed toward her, eyes blazing. "Don't think because I love you, you can turn me into a puppet. And don't think because I love you, you get to crush me." Her chin lifted. "I'm not your enemy. I'm the woman who chose you. But I won't disappear into your shadow." A muscle twitched in his cheek. Then, unexpectedly, a frustrated smile crossed his face. He ran his hand through his hair and exhaled sharply, turning toward the window. "I have to deal with Bianca and her family today. End the arrangement, make the alternative deal work." He moved toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "Because if there's a wedding, Alexandra, it's with you, no one else." She said nothing, waiting. He glanced back over his shoulder, his grey eyes locking onto hers. "Andre will pick you up tonight. You'll be at the gala, by my side." His voice hardened. "I'm not asking." The door slammed behind him, rattling the windows. Alexandra stood alone, her heart pounding, one hand pressed against her stomach. "Tonight," she reminded herself. "He'll see everything tonight." The black SUV arrived at 6 o'clock sharp. Alexandra descended the stairs in her crimson dress, bought with her own money, chosen by her own hand, and found Andre waiting beside the open door, his usually stoic face softening as she approached. Miss Moore. He inclined his head. You look stunning. Thank you, Andre. He held the door as she slid into the back seat, then circled to the driver's side. As the car pulled away from her building, she caught his gaze in the rearview mirror. I've worked for the Bruni family 15 years, he said, his voice thoughtful. I've seen Boss break men without blinking, negotiate million-dollar deals without raising his pulse, walk through rooms of enemies like they were furniture. The corner of his mouth twitched. I've never seen him make pancakes. Heat rose to her cheeks. He told you? I drove him home that morning. Andre's eyes crinkled with warmth. He was smiling, Miss Moore. Actually smiling. I didn't know he still remembered how. She looked out the window at the passing lights, unsure what to say. You've changed him. Andre's voice grew serious. He's still dangerous when he needs to be, but there's something different now. Something human. His eyes met hers in the mirror. You're a strong woman, stronger than anyone he's ever met. I want you to know, I respect you, truly. And whatever happens tonight, I'll be there. Alexandra swallowed past the tightness in her throat. Thank you, Andre. He nodded once, then returned his attention to the road. The gala lights glittered in the distance, growing brighter with every passing second. Inside that building, Maria Bruni was preparing to reveal Mia Harlow's identity to millions of viewers. Inside, Stefano waited, expecting Alexandra on his arm like a prize he'd won. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The Bruni Gala was everything Vegas excess demanded, crystal chandeliers casting fractured light across a ballroom filled with silk gowns and designer suits, champagne flowing like water, cameras broadcasting to millions watching the live stream at home. Alexandra paused at the entrance, her crimson dress drawing stares from every direction. 2 months ago, she'd stood trembling behind a mask at Velvet Noir. Tonight, she needed no mask. She spotted Stefano across the room before he saw her, tall, devastating in a black tuxedo, scanning the crowd with barely concealed impatience. Maria stood nearby, holding court with a cluster of society women. Victor nursed a whiskey by the bar, his expression unreadable. And there was Bianca Romano, draped in white like a bride-to-be, her arm possessively linked through Stefano's, despite his obvious discomfort. Alexandra's stomach tightened, but she forced herself forward. You belong here. You earned this. She'd barely made it 10 steps before Bianca materialized in front of her, champagne glass in hand and venom in her eyes. Well, well. Bianca's gaze raked over Alexandra's dress with undisguised contempt. The little maid cleans up nicely. Did Stefano buy that for you, or did you steal it? Alexandra kept her voice steady. I bought it myself, actually. With what? Bianca laughed, sharp and cruel. The coins he leaves on your nightstand? Nearby guests turned to watch, sensing blood in the water. Alexandra felt heat crawl up her neck, but refused to look away. I don't need his money. I have my own. Something ugly twisted Bianca's perfect features. You're nothing, a nobody, a cheap dancer Stefano uses when he's bored. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a hiss. He's marrying me next week. Whatever fantasy you've been living ends tonight. Bianca, Alexandra started. The champagne hit her face before she could finish, cold, stinging, dripping down her chin onto her crimson silk. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Know your place, Bianca spat. Servant? Alexandra stood frozen, champagne soaking her dress, humiliation burning through every nerve. She saw Stefano pushing through the crowd toward them, fury darkening his face. But before he could reach her, the lights dimmed, and Maria's voice rang out from the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Tonight we have a very special announcement. Maria's smile was practiced and perfect as she commanded the room's attention. As head of digital platforms for Bruni Holdings, I've overseen dozens of ventures over the years, but I must confess, none have surprised me quite like Velvet Stories. She paused for effect, letting the anticipation build. In just 18 months, this online story platform has outperformed every projection we made. It has generated more profit than any other brand in the entire Bruni portfolio, including our legendary nightclubs. A ripple of impressed murmurs swept through the crowd. And this unprecedented success is thanks to one mysterious author whose stories have captivated millions of women around the world. Maria's eyes sparkled with genuine excitement. Mia Harlow, the name everyone is talking about. The writer whose weekly updates have women refreshing their screens at midnight, desperate for the next chapter. Her readership has grown so explosively that just last week we officially welcomed her as a partner in Velvet Stories. She pressed a hand to her chest, her voice softening with theatrical vulnerability. I must be honest with you, I myself have not yet met her. Despite being one of her biggest fans, despite reading every word she's ever written, I have no idea who Mia Harlow really is. The crowd leaned forward collectively, hanging on her every word. But tonight, on this live broadcast watched by millions around the world, I will meet her for the first time, just like all of you. Maria gestured toward the side of the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the woman behind the phenomenon, Mia Harlow. Alexandra's breath caught. No, not yet. I'm covered in champagne. I'm not ready. A spotlight swept across the crowd, searching. Alexandra felt it find her like a physical touch, standing there in her champagne-stained dress, mascara threatening to run, every eye in the room suddenly locked on her. Maria's face went pale. No, she whispered, the microphone catching every horrified syllable. It can't be. Mia Harlow can't be. Alexandra? From somewhere in the crowd, Bianca's voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade. That's impossible. She can't be Mia Harlow. She's a servant, a nobody. Heads turned toward Bianca, confused murmurs rippling through the guests who had no idea what she meant. But Alexandra wasn't looking at Maria or Bianca. She was looking at Stefano. He stood frozen near the front of the stage, his whiskey glass suspended halfway to his lips, and on his face, not anger, not confusion, but a slow, wondering smile spreading across his features. His eyes never left her as she forced her legs to move, one step, then another, climbing the stairs to the stage. So, this is what you meant, his expression seemed to say. This is what I didn't see. She reached the microphone and turned to face the crowd, hundreds of shocked faces, cameras broadcasting her humiliation to millions more. Maria stood beside her, pale as death. Bianca's champagne glass had slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. And Stefano. Stefano was staring at her like he'd never seen her before, like the pieces of a puzzle were finally clicking into place. Alexandra gripped the microphone, her voice steadier than she felt. 2 years ago, I started writing stories to escape my life. I was broke, scared, running from a past that nearly destroyed me. She paused, letting the words settle. I wrote about women like me, women who felt invisible, powerless, trapped. Women who dreamed of being seen, being loved, being valued for more than their circumstances. The room was utterly silent. I never expected anyone to read them. I certainly never expected to be standing here tonight. She glanced at Maria, whose composure had cracked entirely. The woman who invited me to this stage once called me a nobody, a cheap dancer, not good enough for her family. Maria's face went from white to crimson. She didn't know that every time she praised Mia Harlow's writing, she was praising me, the girl she looked down on, the servant she wanted gone. Alexandra turned back to the crowd, finding Stefano's eyes in the sea of faces. I'm not sharing this to humiliate anyone. I'm sharing it because every woman watching deserves to know the truth. Your worth isn't determined by your job title, your bank account, or what powerful people think of you. You determine your own worth. Her voice strengthened. Never let anyone make you feel small. Never let them tell you what you deserve. Write your own story. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, the applause started, tentative at first, then building into a roar. Women in the crowd were crying, phones held high to capture the moment, the live stream chat exploding faster than moderators could track. Victor Bruni set down his whiskey, his eyes fixed on Alexandra with something that looked almost like respect. He leaned toward an associate and spoke loud enough for nearby guests to hear. That platform she writes for earned more in 3 months than all our nightclubs combined, and we almost let her walk away. Stefano moved toward the stage, his expression unreadable. Alexandra watched him climb the first step, The second, she raised her hand. "Stop." He froze. "Not here," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Not like this. If you have something to say to me, say it when there aren't cameras recording every word." She turned and walked off the stage, head high, leaving him standing there alone. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea as she headed for the exit, still dripping champagne, still trembling, but walking taller than she ever had in her life. Behind her, she heard Maria's strangled voice attempting to regain control of the evening. But the gala was already over. Mia Harlow had stolen the show. Alexandra made it to the garden terrace before Stefano caught up with her, his footsteps echoing on the stone path. "Alexandra, wait." She spun to face him, champagne still drying on her skin. "Why? So you can drag me back inside like a possession you misplaced?" Behind him, she saw Victor and Maria emerging from the ballroom, followed by Bianca and her father, a silver-haired man with a face like carved granite. The Romano patriarch looked ready to commit murder. "This is a private conversation," Stefano said without turning. "The hell it is." Romano Sr. stepped forward, his voice shaking with rage. "My daughter has been humiliated in front of every family in Vegas. The engagement—" "There is no engagement." Stefano still hadn't looked away from Alexandra. "There never was." The older man's face contorted with fury. "We had an agreement!" Victor raised a hand, silencing him with a gesture that brooked no argument. His eyes were fixed on Alexandra with an expression she couldn't read, calculating, assessing. "You're Mia Harlow," he said. Not a question. Alexandra lifted her chin. "Would you have let me through your front door if you'd known? Or would I still be the dancer your son was keeping as a pet?" Victor's jaw tightened. Maria made a small sound of protest, but Alexandra cut her off. "Don't." She turned to face the older woman directly. "You read my stories every night. You told your friends Mia Harlow was brilliant, talented, exactly what women needed to hear. But when I served you coffee, you looked through me like I was furniture." Maria's face crumpled, her fingers clutching her pearl necklace. "I didn't know. That's exactly my point. My worth didn't change between yesterday and tonight. The only thing that changed is what you knew about me." Alexandra's voice hardened. "I was always the same person. You just couldn't see past my job title." Silence fell over the terrace. Even Romano had stopped sputtering. Stefano took a step toward her. "Alexandra, and you." She turned on him, 2 months of pain and love and frustration pouring out. "You said you loved everything about me, but you didn't even ask what I wrote. Didn't wonder about the prize money, the platform, any of it. Talented girl, like I was a child who'd won a gold star." His face went pale, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "I didn't realize." "No, you didn't." Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "You loved the idea of me, the girl who needed saving. But you never saw me, the woman who built something from nothing while living under your roof." His hand reached for her, then dropped. "That's not true, isn't it?" She stepped closer, close enough to see the agony in his grey eyes. "You kept me hidden, let your mother treat me like garbage. Stood there silent while Bianca called me a servant." Her hand pressed against his chest. "I love you, Stefano. But I won't be your secret. I won't be the woman you're ashamed to claim." Stefano's hand closed over hers, holding it against his heart. Then he dropped to one knee. A collective gasp rippled through the watching crowd. More guests had followed them outside, phones raised, the live stream still running. "You're right." His voice was rough, stripped raw. "I was a coward. I let my family's expectations matter more than your dignity. I told myself I was protecting you, but I was protecting myself from admitting how much I needed you." He pulled a velvet box from his jacket, opening it to reveal a ring that caught the moonlight like captured fire. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to let me spend the rest of my life earning it." He looked up at her, everything he'd ever hidden laid bare in his expression. "Marry me, Alexandra. Not because you need me, you've proven you don't, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it." Romano's father exploded, his face mottling purple with rage. "This is an outrage! We had a deal, Bruni!" Victor turned to face him, adjusting his cufflinks with deliberate calm. "We had a discussion. Nothing was signed." He glanced at Alexandra, then back at Romano. "Besides, I've recently acquired some new business partnerships that make your family's contribution redundant." Romano took a threatening step forward, fists clenched. "You can't—" "I believe I just did." Victor's smile widened, cold as a knife's edge. "My future daughter-in-law's platform earned more in 3 months than your entire operation. I'd say we're upgrading." Bianca let out a strangled sob and fled back into the ballroom, her father following with threats that no one bothered to acknowledge. Alexandra stood frozen, staring down at Stefano still on his knee, the ring glittering between them. "You planned this," she whispered. "The business deals, the alternatives. I planned to choose you. Everything else was just logistics." He reached for her hand. "Say yes, Alexandra. Please." She opened her mouth to answer. "Alexandra!" A voice from the shadows, slurred, furious, terrifyingly familiar. She turned just in time to see Ray stumbling across the terrace, something metallic glinting in his fist. A knife. Everything happened in fragments, snapshots of horror that would replay in Alexandra's nightmares for years to come. Ray lunging across the terrace, the knife catching moonlight as it arced toward her chest. Stefano moving faster than she'd ever seen anyone move, his body slamming into hers, spinning her away from the blade. The sickening sound of metal meeting flesh. Stefano's grunt of pain, not a scream, just a sharp exhale, like the knife buried in his abdomen, was an inconvenience rather than a death sentence. Ray staggered back, his bloodshot eyes widening at the blood spreading across Stefano's white shirt. "So you got rich?" His voice was slurred, unhinged, spittle flying from his cracked lips. "Forgot your family. I raised you. You're going to give me half of everything you have." He yanked the knife free and raised the blade again. A gunshot cracked through the night. Ray crumpled, clutching his leg, the knife clattering from his fingers. Andre stood 10 feet away, his weapon still raised, face carved from granite. "Boss!" Andre dropped to his knees beside Stefano, his steady hands pressing against the wound. "Boss, stay with me." Alexandra fell beside him, her trembling fingers joining Andre's against the spreading crimson. Blood seeped through their hands, hot and terrifying, pooling on the white stone beneath them. "Stefano!" Her voice shattered on his name. "Stefano, look at me!" His grey eyes found hers, already glazing with shock. A weak smile tugged at his pale lips. "You're okay?" "I'm fine. I'm fine, you idiot." Tears blurred her vision. "Why did you do that?" His hand found hers, slick with his own blood. "Told you." Each word cost him. "Can't function without you." His eyes fluttered closed. "No, no, Stefano!" She cupped his face, slapped his cheek. Don't you dare leave me. You haven't heard my answer yet." Andre pressed harder against the wound, his jaw tight. "Ambulance is 2 minutes out. Keep him talking." The next minutes blurred into sirens and paramedics prying her bloody hands away from Stefano's body. Andre lifted her into the ambulance where they'd loaded him onto a stretcher. She took his hand. Cold. So cold. "Stay with me," she whispered. "I haven't said yes yet. You have to wake up so I can say yes." The hospital waiting room became her prison for 3 days. Victor and Maria came and went, their faces aging with each update from the surgical team. The knife had pierced his liver, caused massive internal bleeding. They'd lost him twice on the table before stabilizing him. Infection set in on the 2nd day. His fever spiked to dangerous levels. Alexandra refused to leave. She slept in the chair beside his bed, ate whatever Andre brought her, and talked to Stefano's unconscious form for hours about her stories, about the baby, about the life she wanted to build with him. "I wrote my first story when I was 16, she murmured on the 3rd night, her thumb tracing circles on his hand. "After Ray, after what he did, I needed somewhere to escape, somewhere I could be strong instead of scared." She pressed her lips to his knuckles. You made me feel strong in real life, for the first time. His fingers twitched. Her breath caught. Stefano? Another twitch. Then his hand tightened around hers, weak but deliberate. His eyes opened slowly, grey finding green in the dim light. Alexandra. Her name came out as a rasp. She leaned closer, tears streaming down her face. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. He winced, shifting against the pillow. The baby? Fine. We're both fine. She guided his hand to her stomach, holding it there. Because of you. His palm pressed flat against her belly, wonder softening his features. Mine. Yes. She leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. Both of us. Forever. If you still want... His grip tightened, cutting her off. Marry me. The words came out stronger, urgent. Not because of the baby, because I'd rather die protecting you than live without you. And I almost did. A weak smile tugged at his cracked lips. So I need to hear you say yes, before anything else tries to kill me. A sob laugh escaped her throat. Yes. His eyebrows lifted, hope flickering in his tired eyes. Yes? Yes, Stefano. I'll marry you. His hand found the back of her neck, pulling her down into a kiss that tasted like tears and forever. When she pulled back, his eyes were wet too. He laughed, a painful, wheezing sound that made the heart monitor spike. My mother's favorite author, he managed, shaking his head against the pillow, living under my roof, and I called you talented girl like you were a child. She brushed the hair from his forehead, smiling. You did. I'm an idiot. You are. She kissed his forehead gently. But you're my idiot. And you took a knife for me. So I suppose I'll keep you. His thumb stroked across her wrist, finding her pulse. Forever? Yes, forever. 2 months later, the Bruni estate had been transformed. 10,000 white roses cascading from every archway, crystal chandeliers catching the late afternoon sun, 300 guests seated along an aisle that seemed to stretch forever. Alexandra stood at the entrance, her fingers trembling against Victor's arm. The man who'd once dismissed her as the dancer now stood ready to walk her down the aisle in his perfectly tailored suit. Her wedding gown was ivory silk and delicate lace, the empire waist draping over the gentle curve of her 4-month belly, barely visible. But there. Victor's hand covered hers. My son is a better man because of you. His voice was rough. Welcome to the family, Alexandra. The doors swung open. 300 faces turned, but Alexandra only saw one. Stefano stood at the end of the aisle, devastating in black, his grey eyes fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. She walked toward him. The guests blurred. Only Stefano remained in focus. Victor placed her hand in Stefano's, their fingers intertwined. The officiant's words seemed far away. All she could focus on was the tremor in his hands, the tears he didn't bother hiding when she said, I do. When he kissed her, the crowd erupted, but she barely heard it. She was melting into her husband's arms, his hand finding her belly. They pulled apart, and Stefano's lips brushed her ear. Let's leave these guests and go home, Mrs. Bruni. His hand tightened on her waist. I want this dress off you. I want you naked in my arms. Right now. Heat flooded her cheeks. We have 300 guests, Stefano. His eyes darkened. They'll survive. Mia Harlow didn't disappear after the wedding. She evolved. Alexandra became a partner and editor at Velvet Stories, guiding new voices while continuing to write her own. Her weekly chapters turned into novels, 3 bestsellers in 2 years, all published under the name that had changed her life. She kept the pen name not to hide anymore, but to honor the woman she'd become. Someone who turned pain into power, one story at a time. 4 months later. The hospital corridor was bright and busy. Alexandra walked beside Stefano, her belly now round and heavy at 8 months, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back. They were leaving her routine checkup. Their baby girl was healthy, almost ready to arrive. A familiar face appeared from a doorway. The urologist who'd seen Stefano a year ago stopped mid-stride, his eyes moving from Stefano to Alexandra's pregnant belly. "Mr. Bruni?" A knowing smile spread across the doctor's face. "How are you? Everything working well?" Stefano's arm wrapped around Alexandra, pulling her close. He grinned, open, unguarded, nothing like the cold man who'd sat in that office a year ago. "Never better, Doctor. We're having a daughter." The urologist's gaze lingered on Alexandra's belly, on the way Stefano looked at her, on the matching gold bands on their fingers. He leaned closer to Stefano, lowering his voice. "Seems like love cures what medicine can't." Stefano pressed a kiss to Alexandra's temple. "It does." They walked out into the Las Vegas sunshine, his hand never leaving her belly. The girl who'd hidden behind a mask and the man who'd been dead inside, both finally alive. Together. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow. Now I have to ask you, if you were in Alexandra's shoes, would you marry Stefano? Yes or no? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one and I can't wait to hear what you think. See you in the next story.